All right, yeah, welcome to my channel. My name is Mosjaro. If it's your first time of coming across my video and then the video has been of help to you, do well to subscribe, to share, and to place a comment so that other persons get to see these videos and other videos. Now, what am I trashing today? We are going to be looking at specifically at metabolism of what? Of carbohydrate. We're looking at the biochemistry of the metabolism of carbohydrate. Now, I'm going to be taking it from the angle of all the related pathways that you need to know when it comes to the breakdown or the metabolism of what? Of carbohydrate. So we're going to be looking at all the pathways that you need to know. But we need to look at, and in looking at these pathways, what we should pay attention on is the enzymes that are involved in this pathway, the regulatory enzyme, the committed enzyme. You get it now? And of course, we're going to be looking at the regulatory step and the committed step and those factors that tends to regulate these pathways. So we're talking about the factors that can inhibit the pathway and the factors that can stimulate or encourage the pathway. And of course, one important thing that people fail to understand in this particular aspect of biochemistry is that they fail to look at the organs that these processes or this pathway occur. So I'm going to break it down step by step. But the video might be long. I need to break it down into two sections. Now, look at it very well. Now, first off, talking about carbohydrates. Now, I've done a video before, though I'm going to do other videos that aligns or tends to classify carbohydrate as it were. And talking about the classification of carbohydrate, talking about the sugar carbohydrate, the non-sugar carbohydrate, talking about the sugar carbohydrate, talking about the monosaccharide, the disaccharide, the oligosaccharide, then the non-sugar carbohydrate, talking about the polysaccharide. And at this point in time, you should know that there are two types of polysaccharide. We have the homopolysaccharide, the heteropolysaccharide. Now, I'm going to do a broad video on these aspects of what carbohydrate. But for now, we want to look at how are carbohydrates metabolized in various organs in the body and the pathways that are involved in these metabolism. Now, first off, in metabolism of carbohydrate, there are some pathways that I need to list out that you must know. First off, we have to pay attention to the what? To the glycolytic what? The glycolytic pathway. Now, is one of the simplest pathway in carbohydrate metabolism. Very, very easy. Then number two, we need to pay attention to the what? To the Krebs what? To the Krebs cycle, which is also known as the what? As the TCA cycle, or if you like, as the what? As the citric acid what? Cycle. Now, this TCA cycle stands for what? The tricarboxylic acid what? Cycle. Now, this Krebs is named after the scientist known as Hans Krebs that tends to elucidate the pathway. Now, number three is the what? Is the oxidative what? Oxidative phosphorylation. Now, make you not too fear. Now, these three pathways that I just brought out now are the three steps that are involved in what? In respiration. That means in the breakdown of what? Of glucose, of carbohydrate to release what? Energy. Now, another pathway that we must know again is the what? Is the pentose phosphate pathway. Now, this pentose phosphate pathway is like a diversion from the glycolytic pathway. No wonder this pentose phosphate pathway is also known as the what? As the hexose monophosphate what? Monophosphate shunt. It is so. It's also known as the hexose monophosphate shunt. That's why we need to know. At what condition does this pathway occur? At what condition does this pathway occur? Now we need to also look at another pathway again, which is known as the what? Which is known as the glyoxylate what? The glyoxylate pathway. Now we need to specify where does this pathway occur. Now this pathway again is just like a shunt from the what? From the Krebs cycle. Now, this part usually occurs in seeds, in fungi, and of course in what? In bacteria, usually in seeds. Now, look at it now. Now, all this pathway is what we're going to be breaking down in this series of video with Mosjaro. So, the metabolism of what? Of carbohydrate. That means carbohydrate what? Biochemistry. Now, quickly, we need to start with this first one, the glycolytic pathway. And again, I need to repeat, if you are looking at any of these pathways, what you should put at the back of your mind is where it occurs. When I say where it occurs, in the cytoplasm or in the mitochondrion, the organ that it occurs, is it the liver? Does it occur in the kidney? Does it occur in the muscle? Does it occur in the brain? Does it occur in the red blood cells? So we need to be bringing it out. Then of course the enzyme, there's no pathway without what? Enzyme, because enzyme is involved in the breakdown of what? Of these macromolecules. Are you there now? So in this series of videos, we're going to be looking at the metabolism of what? Of macromolecules, talking about the likes of the carbohydrate, talking about the likes of the protein, talking about the likes of the what? The lipids. But we are starting with this aspect in this series of videos, which is the what? Carbohydrate what? Metabolism. Now, looking at glycolytic pathway. Now let's start with the glycolytic pathway. Now, why does the glycolytic pathway occur? Where does it occur? What is the breakdown? Summary first. Let me bring out the summary. The glycolytic pathway involves the breakdown of what? Of glucose to form what? To form pyruvate. Now look at it now. Quick summary. The glycolytic pathway. Now glycolysis involves the breakdown of what? Of glucose, which is a 6-carbon sugar, to what? To what? To pyruvate, which is a what? A 3-carbon what? Molecule. Now, 2 pyruvate is formed in this process. Now, I love to bring out the breakdown first, or begin to look at it in depth. So, what you must know first, basically, is that glycolysis involves the breakdown of 6-carbon sugar. It must not necessarily be glucose, because fructose can also enter into the glycolytic pathway. Galactose can also enter into the glycolytic pathway. So if I want to summarize, I can say that glycolysis is the enzymatic breakdown. That means it involves what? It involves what? Enzymes. Enzymatic breakdown of what? Of 1 6-carbon sugar to what? 2 molecules of what? Pyruvate. And pyruvate is a 3-carbon sugar or a 3-carbon molecule. Now look at it now. So we are succeeded in giving out the breakdown that involves enzyme. The next thing we need to look at now is that where does glycolysis occur in the cell? Now, glycolysis, like I said just now, is one of the steps involved in what? In respiration. And you know fully well, respiration has to bring about the formation of what? Energy in the form of what? Of ATP. Now look at it now. Now this glycolysis occurs in the where? In the cytosol, in the cell, which you can also regard as what? At the cytoplasm. Now the gel-like structure of the cytoplasm. Now this glycolysis occurs in the where? In the cytosol of the cell. You dey get them so. And again, this glycolysis occurs under anaerobic what? Anaerobic condition. That means it occurs in the absence of what? Of oxygen. Now, what is the end product of glycolysis? Is what? Is 2 pyruvate molecule. Now, let's start the enzymatic breakdown and how it is regulated. But please, I want to bring this out first of all, so that you get the full point in glycolysis. That first of all, there's what we call regulatory step in biochemistry. There's what we call regulatory step, and there's what we call what? The committed what? The committed step. Now, what's the regulatory step? The regulatory step are the step that is involved in controlling the what? The steps in the pathway. So these are steps that we can use to control the glycolytic pathway. Now, the committed step, when you hear committed step, that means it's a step that when it gets to that part of the pathway must get to the end. That means it's committed to the end. So when it gets to this particular part, there is no turning back. So no wonder you can just simply rephrase that the committed step is the step of no return. I like to put it that way. That the committed step is the step of what? Of no return. That means when it gets to that particular step in the pathway must definitely proceed to the end. Show you the same now. So we have regulatory step and we have what? Committed step. Yes, the committed step is also a regulatory step, but the regulatory step are not necessarily committed step. So you get them now. So committed step are regulatory step, but regulatory step are not necessarily committed what? Step. And in glycolysis, please take note that there are what? That there are 3 what? 3 regulatory steps in what? In glycolysis. We are going to be highlighting out or bringing out the regulatory step. That's why you must watch the video to the end, so that you get the full picture of this. Now, there are 3 regulatory steps when it comes to glycolysis, but there's what? There's 1 committed step, and we're going to be looking at the enzyme that catalyzes those steps. So what we're going to be doing next is that let's look at the what? Glycolytic what? Pathway properly. Now, since we have known where glycolysis occurs, what is glycolysis, where it occurs, under what condition, involves enzymes. Now we're going to be looking at these enzymes. Now we need to say again which organs, like I elucidated just now, which organs do glycolysis occur. Very good. Now glycolysis occurs chiefly, like majorly, in the where? In the what? In the liver. Occurs in the what? In the muscles, specifically skeletal muscles. Occurs also in the what? In the kidney, and also occurs in the what? In the brain. Now, glycolysis also occurs in the where? In the red blood cell. Now, these are the various organs through which in which glycolysis will occur, but occur chiefly in the what? In the liver. That's why we said that what carbohydrate metabolism occurs in the where again? In the liver. Now, we have seen already that these are the basic points that we need to know. Now, when we are taking this step, I'll be paying attention to the enzymes and of course the regulatory steps. And again, there's one thing I want to bring out very fast, lest I forget. There are some factors that tends to work to inhibit glycolysis. We are going to bring them out. And there are some factors that tends to do what? To stimulate glycolysis or to promote glycolysis. Now, what are these factors? Now, let me quickly bring it out now. Now, please take note that high amounts of what? Of what's it called? High amount of glucose 6 phosphate. Now, high amount of glucose, let me start with glucose first. High amount of glucose stimulate glycolysis. You understand? So, high amount of glucose. Why high amount of ATP inhibits glycolysis? Because the end product of glycolysis is to generate what? ATP together with this molecule now. Hope you are getting it now. So if there is higher amount of ATP, that means it's trying to tell the cell that I don't need much energy. So it tends to inhibit what? Glycolysis. So high amount of ATP inhibits what? Glycolysis. Now look at it very, very well. Now let's now break down this glycolytic pathway. What are the steps involved? Then we'll begin to bring out some other points that you need to pay attention to. Now look at it now. I'll be using some abbreviations so that of course it can accommodate this board. Now quickly, without wasting time, what's glycolysis on its own? Now breakdown of what? Of glucose. Now in other videos I'll be bringing out the structures to represent it, because you need to know the structures so that you get to understand it properly. But let me just use the name first to bring out the structure, the pathway, so that you understand it more. Now this is glucose. Now the first step of glycolysis is the what? Is the phosphorylation of what? Of glucose with what? ATP. Now I need to generate ATP, but in generating ATP, I need ATP to generate ATP. So in the first step of glycolysis, the glucose is phosphorylated with the help of an enzyme known as what? Known as exokinase. Now, exokinase is the enzyme that what? That phosphorylate glucose. Now, if this glucose is phosphorylated, now look at what we happen. It will now give me what? Glucose 6 what? Glucose 6 phosphate. Show you the same. So glucose 6 phosphate. So what's the first enzyme of glycolysis? Is exokinase. Now this exokinase also has a counterpart known as glucokinase. Show you the same. So now this exokinase is involved in the phosphorylation of what? Glucose to form what? Glucose 6 phosphate. Now ATP is the one donating the phosphate group. So ATP is needed in this what? In this step. Now this is the first regulatory step in glycolysis. Now this step is regulatory. Show you the get am, but this is not a committed step in the sense that this glucose 6 phosphate that is formed can be channeled into the what? The pentose what? The pentose phosphate pathway, which you must know can be channeled into the pentose phosphate pathway. Now, one thing about this pathway we should be looking at in subsequent videos is that this pathway is very important. Why? Because it helps to generate, you must put this at the back of your mind, it helps to generate what? NADPH that is needed in lipid metabolism. Show the same. So, and again, it helps also to generate what? To generate ribose 5 what? Ribose 5 phosphate that is needed in the synthesis of what? Of DNA and what? And RNA. Show you the same now. Now also this pentose phosphate pathway also helps to what? To reduce what? Oxidative what? Oxidative stress through the regulation of the amount of what? Of glutathione that is formed in the what? In the cell. Now look at it very well. So you can see that this is the reason why this step is not a what? A committed step, but instead is a what? Is a regulatory what? A regulatory step. Show you the same. So now there are other things that we need to bring out here, but very quickly I need to bring out something very, very quickly. Now let's continue. Now look at this now. Sorry for that. Now look at this now. They said This is the first step involved in what? In glycolysis. Remember, it is not a committed step, it's a regulatory step. Now, after this step, you know what now happens next? What happens next is what? This glucose 6-phosphate is now isomerized. So what did it happen for here? The first step is phosphorylation. The second step that is occurring here is what? Is isomerization. So this step is now isomerized. So isomerization occurs to now form what? Fructose 6-phosphates. Share you the same now. So from glucose 6-phosphate to what? Fructose 6-phosphate. You now ask yourself, what is happening here? Is what? Is isomerization. Do you understand it now? Now, from fructose 6-phosphate, we now have what? We now have this another phosphorylation occurs here. ATP now comes into what? To phosphorylate. You can see now that for me to generate ATP, I need ATP also. Now, but please count the number of ATP that has been used here. 1, 2. Show you the same now. So if I phosphorylate fructose 6-phosphate, I will now have what? Fructose 1,6 what? Bisphosphate. Now, this step is another regulatory step, and this step is the committed step. So, what is the committed step? What's the committed step of what? Of glycolysis is the step that catalyzes what? That is from fructose 6-phosphate to fructose 1,6 bisphosphate. Show you the same. Now, this is the committed step. And which enzyme catalyzes this what? This phosphorylation is what? Is PFK1. What does PFK stands for? Phosphofructokinase 1. Show you the same now. Phosphofructokinase. Now, this is the committed enzyme of what? Of glycolysis. That you must put at the back of your mind. So this is the committed enzyme. So you can see so far we have taken how many steps? This is 1, this is what? 2, and this is what? The third step. So the third step of glycolysis is the committed step of glycolysis, and it's catalyzed by this what? Reaction. Now by this enzyme now. Now you succeeded. We succeeded in generating what? Fructose 1,6 bisphosphate. Now, what will happen is that this fructose 1,6 bisphosphate now cleaves. There's a cleavage that happens here, and this enzyme is done by what? By an aldolase. And this enzyme is what? An aldolase. Of course, when I cleave this guy, remember this fructose 6-phosphate is a 6-carbon sugar. So when I cleave it, I'm going to get 3-carbon sugar. So the first one I'm going to get is what? Is dihydroxyacetone phosphates. You see how so? Now, why the other one is what? Is glyceraldehyde 3 what? Phosphates. Show you the same so now. Now, this one can be represented as what? As DAP. If you want to just understand it properly. Why this one is known as what? As what? As DAP. Now, I'm going to be breaking down this video into some series so that you get to understand it properly, very, very well. But look at what we have succeeded in doing now. Now, this is the first region of what? Of glycolysis. Now, remember, look at it as kinase. What's going about isomerization occur here. Are you getting me now? That means fructose 6-phosphate isomerase. It's an isomerase that is happening here. Now, what happens? Isomerizes this glucose. No, glucose and fructose are isomers. So it isomerizes this glucose 6-phosphate to fructose 6-phosphate. Now, remember that this fructose 6-phosphate is what? Is phosphorylated to now form fructose 1,6 bisphosphate. Now, the enzyme that does that reaction is what? Phosphofructokinase what? 1. This is the committed enzyme of what? Of glycolysis. Now, when that happens, aldolase cleaves. Now, this next region we want to enter now is that this DAP is converted to what? To GAP. Why? Because this guy is unstable. Then that means we are going to be having two glyceraldehyde to proceed in the what? In the pathway. But I'm going to be breaking these videos down step by step. So if you're having any difficulty at all, I believe that this video will be of help to what? To you. Now you have known. Now we have brought out 2 regulatory steps and 1 committed step. Now there are other steps to get to the what? To the end. But this is the first what? Series of video on carbohydrate metabolism in glycolysis, to be what? To be specific. So I will see you in other videos. Please do well to subscribe, do well to share with your friends in any school at all that have any difficulty in these pathway carbohydrate metabolism. So I'll see you in the next series of videos. Thank you very much.